So help me here, okay? Because I have been busy and I have not managed to get into any of the details on what specifically has happened in reported details on Tyreek Hill beyond this guy that we made a symbol for heinous behavior appears to have been the victim of a doctored tape and now will not be punished. Do I have everything right so far?
No, very little of that.
Okay, all right. All right, very good. All right.
The gods are stronger than you, my friend.
Please help me. Please help me understand the story because I have not read up on it. I have been busy.
Yeah.
Eat
yeah,
it.
you have.
Yeah.
Good morning, by the way. So it came out today. It's been reported that Tyreek Hill is not going to be suspended. Now, this all pertains to this recent issue with his kid, right? There was an investigation of child abuse. The kid had a broken arm, but the police department in where he lives in Kansas, they didn't have conclusive evidence. So in some ways, it wasn't entirely surprising that the NFL and also the mother of the child who recorded him, and we'll get to that in a second, that's what you're referring to with the tape, didn't cooperate with the NFL in the investigation. It's important to note this is the mother of the child who he pleaded guilty to abusing. It was domestic abuse by strangulation in 2014, which is why the Chiefs were able to get him so late in the draft. He pleaded guilty at the time. There was also a police report that I encourage people to read. I wrote about it at the time. It's extremely graphic, and it describes her injuries. You know what? I feel like I should read it because people keep...
All right, we'll give you a second.
Yeah, well, anyway, so now
in the interim, Mike, talk about the Top Gun trailer. We'll give you time to find what it is that you're looking for there.
Okay.
Yeah, awkward segue, admittedly, but I don't want her...
According to a Stillwater Police Department arrest report, his girlfriend at the time, Crystal Espinal, showed up in an emergency room with cuts and bruises on her face and neck. The officer who filed the report noted that her lip was, from my piece, her lip was busted, she was wincing with pain, and the mark under her eye was turning purple as she spoke. Espinal, who was 8 weeks pregnant at the time, said Hill had grabbed her neck with his hands. So he pleaded guilty. Draft stock fell. Now there's this new allegation. There's not enough evidence, but there's this tape. And that's the tape you're referring to that was released by a local, I think, TV station in Kansas City. So the original release was 11 minutes, or it was a shorter, abbreviated version. So it wasn't doctored. They just released a shorter version in which she tells him that their son is terrified of him. And he says to her, this is just on the tape. This is no allegations. You can listen to this. You need to be terrified of me too, B-word. Then his side or somebody leaked the entire version in which he denies not only that he abused the child, which he has been consistent on from the beginning, that he did not do it. And I think that played a role in him not getting suspended. He also denies the 2014 incident that I just described the police report from.
That he denies that even though he pled guilty.
Yes, and like Dan, people plead guilty all the time to things they don't do for reasons of money or not having a lawyer. There were some lawyer issues, but there was also a police report describing pretty graphic physical evidence that I think people do not know about, which is why I wanted to read that. Anyways, I'm not surprised necessarily that the NFL didn't suspend him because of the abuse allegations, because it obviously there, I guess, wasn't conclusive evidence. The cops didn't pursue it. I thought they would come down on him because of the verbal threat, given the fact that this is a woman he has a very disturbing history with, right? The history that I just described. So given that context, for him to come out and threaten her, which is what that was, and that's something that the league has suspended players for before, Jimmy Smith, on the Ravens, I am surprised they did nothing.
What would have been the right penalty? Because we've talked a lot around here about... The law enforcement is not good at handling these cases. They're often murky. Football has stepped into the breach wanting to be a moral authority, and it is also not equipped. What do you think? You're a fair and reasonable person. What do you think is a fair punishment given the set of facts that are in front of you?
Right. So in my estimation, you'd be punishing him for the threat, right, given their history. Right. Like, there's no precedent for that. Jimmy Smith was suspended for 4 games. For emotional abuse and threats, not physical abuse. So I thought that would have been a guideline they might have followed.
Why do you think they didn't? That seems odd.
Was that Giants kicker who?
Josh Brown, yeah, that's another example of emotional abuse that was described.
What was he suspended?
Well, they originally didn't want to suspend him, and then I think they gave him a couple games or one game, Mike, off the top of my head.
So, but there was a thing because the Giants protected him, or the Giants seemed to.
The Giants gave him a contract.
They knew about it.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about this stuff, and so there's no ifs or like we see the threat. It's there. We know his history, and I tweeted that. My mentions are full of Chiefs fans saying, well, you know, she could have faked her injuries. And, well, he could have been threatening her for unrelated reasons. And I mean, it's exhausting to see that. But also, to me, when the league does this, they are corroborating those views in a way. They're giving, I think, support to the people who believe those things.
The original suspension for Josh Brown was 1 game. The NFL tacked on 6 more games after that.
Yeah, he was put on the exempt list.
But it was a barrage of incidents, right? A barrage of calls to the home. Like, it was pretty clear that what was happening there is a relationship that was super turbulent and there were a lot of threats.
Yeah, there's no consistency, obviously. And I don't think it's possible that, like, to call for consistency in this stuff. You can't just say, okay, 4 games, every case is really different, especially with domestic violence. Like, context matters, shared history matters. The fact that they had this in their past, to me, should matter. Like, it would be one thing for someone to say those words to somebody he had never touched or had not pleaded guilty to strangling, and if there wasn't a police report describing physical injuries, that would be very different. It's like they looked at this and completely disregarded that history to me. And I think that's what I find so shocking.
I'm conflicted by this case in particular because Mina just opened her eyes to a previous precedent of something similar, but that also seems a little silly and callous considering the circumstances. You'd prefer them looking at everything at a case-by-case basis, right, which they just did, and their investigation was pretty thorough. But I still feel unsatisfied.
They are also incentivized, by the way, to punish him. They're incentivized because this is the only thing that gets criticized. A no penalty is the only thing that gets criticized, correct?
I don't think people care. I don't know. I know, I mean, this is going to blow over in a day. He's really, really good.
Right.
He's going to go on the field, and fantasy owners are still going to be thrilled with him, and Chiefs
You'd
fans.
prefer the league to be consistent, though, wouldn't you?
Well, she says you can't be.
Look, Mike, you're right. They did investigate it, and the police didn't, they ended up dropping. There's still, I think, an ongoing case involving the child's welfare, which is very important. I don't blame the league for not punishing him for the abuse. I blame them for letting the threat slide because there's no allegations there. We heard it, okay? And I think that's what's so chilling to me.